Hello and welcome to Do the Right Thing, a weekly writing prompt podcast. I'm Matias.
And I'm Jarvis.
Both of us love storytelling, but we know that sometimes it can be difficult to just sit down and write.
So, we're taking turns doing a challenge. Each week, one of us sits down and writes for 30 minutes. Our goal is to create a complete short story using 3 of 4 randomly generated words.
Then we come on the podcast, we read the story, we talk about what we learned in writing it, and then we talk about stories written by you listeners.
We're simply here to help you do the right thing.
A Doof Media production. Dope. It only took us 60 episodes to get that down.
Yeah.
Actually, this is 59, right? Yes.
Yeah, so almost 60.
Almost 60.
We've been doing this 8 weeks longer than 1 year.
Wow. Damn.
Yeah. What a great milestone. Proud of ourselves.
Yeah. I want to apologize for any bad audio on my end. I'm recording in an echoey room. I had my septum pierced today. So my nose is all
literally
running and,
1 hour.
Yeah, just a couple hours ago. So I'm still dealing with that, and there's also a cat which I'm allergic to. So just a lot of stuff going on here. So just apologies. But otherwise, I'm pretty good. What about you, Jarvis?
I'm doing pretty good. I've finally gotten back home after spending some time with my family, so that was a really nice recharge. And yeah, just pretty excited to work on this podcast. I've been trying my best to keep myself busy because I guess now it is officially, quote unquote, summer vacation, even though nothing's really gonna change. So.
Yeah, it's super strange talking to younger siblings or friends of the family who are still they just technically finished classes a week ago, because I forget that college lets out so much earlier. Yeah, that's super strange to me.
Yeah, and now they're in the exact same boat that we are. But thankfully, since we both have this podcast, there's something to look forward to at the end of every week.
Yeah, just because it's summer, it doesn't mean that you should stop working on your craft.
I know.
In studies.
In fact, especially during this summer, I think it's great to even up the amount of time that you really give towards that craft. Because, hey, we got nothing but time, baby.
Every time I think about summer, I'm reminded of a certain tutoring service commercial where a kid, it's just a little kid, and he gets out of the pool, and he hits the side of his head to get water out of his ear, right? Mm-hmm. Except instead of water, it's words like math and writing and other the skills that you learned in school, and then the message is you lose a lot of your skills over the 3 months that you don't practice them. So put your kid in summer tutoring. And so that's terrifying to me that you just lose it like water at the pool.
I think I've seen the exact same commercial, and every time that I saw it, I was like, that's not true. You don't forget everything.
You probably do forget a bit though, which is just it does seem like something's wrong. Anyway, practice writing. That's the message here.
Yeah, practice writing and keep up on those maths.
The last thing I'm gonna say before we should just get into the actual episode proper. Yeah. I started a new podcast. It's called Decomposing Worm. I think I announced it last episode.
Si, senor.
Yeah, so we started that with Clarence. First episode's out. I'm really, really happy with how it turned out, although I wish that we had cut down the script a bit because it was 3 hours long. But otherwise, it was really, really good. It's always a joy to talk to Clarence, so I'm glad that it turned out the way it did. So
yeah, and I'm glad that y'all both seem to enjoy making it so much. That's really great to find a project that you are very proud in that aspect. So really, really great.
Yeah. I'll remind everyone about that at the end of this podcast as well before we announce next week's words. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into it, right?
Cool. So this week's words were what, Matias?
Wrestle, rush, central, and discourage.
Ooh, and which ones did you use this week?
I used wrestle, rush, and central. And you'll find out pretty quick. I wrote kind of a arena kind of thing, and I felt like some of the words, wrestle, and the other ones were leading in that direction. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. We were focusing on action this week, right? Mm-hmm. So I did write something with some good amount of action. And I'm excited to talk about how that worked or didn't work.
All right, nice. So let's go ahead and get into your story.
Mm-hmm. So this story is called Hybrid Dueling. An arena attendant guided me up the steps to my pedestal, and I was greeted with a full view of the arena. It was styled in a Romanesque way, all yellow concrete, a circular pit filled with sand. Above the main bit were bars, with glass shielding all around, and beyond that, leagues of hybrid duel fans milling around between the fights. This tournament was still in its appetizer phase. That's what I was. There was no weight classes in hybrid dueling, no top or lower leagues. The way they balanced fights so that it wasn't always little modified scrub lizards getting devoured by augmented crocodile-ape mixes was that combatants were always allowed to choose their opponents. Runts wanted shots against the big guys, and big guys wanted to fight other big guys they thought they could beat. If they thought they could lose, they wouldn't take the fight. All you had to do was know how to pick the right opponent. It wasn't easy. You had to read up on all the competition, consider not only past fights, but how long between the last and the new, and if they had the funding for upgrades and what kind. Were they the type to switch up their style between fights? What were the rumors saying? Could they be trusted? And even after you considered all the factors, researched every aspect of the competition, you never know what tricks have been cooked up. You could always be totally, completely wrong. It was always a gamble. Today, I was one of those runts, the ones that came in planning to lose. At least, that's what everyone else thought. Except I was going to win, damn it. Above, I could see the banners on cheap Neo screens advertising the match and sponsors. The headliners showed up, the main one being Hetero Khan, an Easterner with a winning streak. Their Gao Galu, something reminiscent of a werewolf and a primordial lizard, had ripped apart more hybrids this season than anyone not in the top 10. By nature of the tournament, the headliners were going to be entered in the bracket like everyone else, but there was a full expectation that they were going to dissolve the competition. A week ago, we'd had all our creatures inspected, our histories vetted. They even ran x-rays through all of our hybrids to find out any secret bits. That was done after someone had rigged their creature with an acid trap inside its stomach to force a draw if it was about to lose. An opponent got a good claw in the belly, the acid trap blew. Killed the opponent, killed itself, but worse, the spray landed beyond the cage, scarring the front row for life. Literally. So now the bars have been covered in glass, acid has been banned, and we now have to go through x-rays. My opponents knew what they were up against, probably even the runts. They'd even run a background check on me. 12-time tournament runt, 8 wins, my highest dual win streak, against other runts, mind you, being 3, and that was 4 tournaments ago. I was poor, got my biofunding from the tournament performance pay, paid for food with a day job giving the neighborhood kids gene lifts, and they knew that. You got paid for wins, but also for performance, and my hybrids died in dramatic ways. I was as underdog as they come, and they thought I liked it that way. I was a facet of the wheel, baby, and people are comfortable when the wheel turns greasy-like. But not today. I smiled as I saw the other headliner, Amicus Burlow, climb up the pedestal. She was tall, scarred, even though she could afford to remove them, and dressed in a jacket made almost entirely out of fringe, like something had pounced and taken tooth and claw to it. She plopped down into the big seat on her side, a relaxed composure like a comfortable conqueror. It was a recent look. I bet it was meant to balance out against Hetero Khan's fierceness. I stepped up to the bars, looking up at her, because of course the runt's pedestal was lower. I yelled, loud enough for the microphones to hear, "Amicus, remember me?" She looked down at me and sneered. Then she turned to look at her lackeys behind her, as if to say, "You see this punk?" and they all laughed and giggled. I had to hold back my own laugh, threatening to burst out of my throat. It's all part of the performance, honey, I thought at Amicus. Come on, be my bad guy. I could taste the revenge narrative. She was on the down and out at this point, and she knew it. That's why she turned heel. You get another go at being interesting when you become a bully, put on a character. She probably came prepared for a loss. This fight against Hetero Khan was probably her last shot at relevance, at least unless in her retirement she can convince some hapless rich fan to fund another big idea. She finally ended that long look at her comrades, and they finished their giggles. She leaned down to look at me, making sure her angles left her looking big and strong. In a voice modified to sound deeper, she let out a single laugh. Ha! Then said, No, I don't remember you, runt. And I'm not gonna remember you after Gut Wrench leaves your hybrid's intestines in the sand. Your Gut Wrench turned my dear Scorpula into paste. She was my friend. I put some emotion into my words. I had to think of something sad happening, like my mother coming back and apologizing or something. Then I huffed a breath and lowered my tone, still loud enough that the microphones could hear, of course. Now, I'm going to take my revenge. I didn't actually care about my Scorpula. It had just been another experiment. I hadn't even named it until a form asked for one. No, all my previous hybrids were trials to perfect what was now my newest creation, the one that was going to win this match. She knew as well as I did that this was a performance, but she thought I was doing it for her, to set her up for another big win, stomping someone down, in the hopes that she would throw me some credits for the little boost. She was so wrong. She let out a hefty, evil laugh. We'll see about that, runt. Start the match. She waved a hand and a gong sounded, chains whirred. The gates rolled up and our creatures stepped into the arena. Hers, Gut Wrench, burst out the gate, planting those long arms, and roared, spittle flying off a mess of fangs. A good show. Mine stepped out. It was short, only half Gut Wrench's size, a head shorter than me, even, and furred, which was one of the basest skins. Scales were more armored. Bare leather made sure the hair would make grabs easier. Skarzar was sinuous, a cross between a weasel and a snake with powerful kangaroo legs and long arms. Not from actual kangaroos, but modeled after them. He didn't look like much. He really looked like any other runt. Still small, still looking like he was made of shoddy material. But he was better. No secret tricks, no hidden blades, no poison, no extra limbs under the skin. Just better. His steps onto the field were calm, assured. His natural walking stance was more of a hop. Those back legs were better for that kind of movement, but I had trained him to walk carefully for showy moments like this. He looked like a wary puma, snaking and prowling around the edge of the arena. All part of the performance. The confidence was supposed to juxtapose how quickly she tore him apart, but it also made for a great hero narrative. You ready to have your runt torn in two? Amicus yelled, voice thick like her creature. No. I looked up at her and let her see my expression. A total, neutral confidence. Are you? Her eyes widened a fraction. I could see her expression adjust, her chin getting just a bit more set. She turned back to look at the creatures. She knew what was happening here, but it was too late to back out. Now she could only hope that I was a fool. I wasn't. The horn blared, a long sound that kept going even as the two launched at each other. Fur collided with leather as Gut Wrench swung those long arms into the side of Skarzar. But he was ready, shifting to slide along the ground with a blow, twisting out of reach of the clumsy hands. When Gut Wrench had reached the edge of its momentum, turning its body to face Skarzar's new position, Scar planted his feet, and with those powerful legs, rocketed forward. Gut-Wrench stuck an elbow out, but the angle was off, glancing, not blocking, and Scar sank teeth into it. Then his neck went rigid, and he let his entire body swing around Gut-Wrench with emotion. Flesh ripped as those teeth, made jagged just for this kind of motion, like saw blades, twisted in place. Scar let go and landed feet first, tail whipping out for balance. This is what I'd made Skarzar for. No dirty tricks, no one-hit wonders, just a damn good strategy and a body made for it. You know the saying, death by 1,000 cuts? It's too slow in practice, but if each bite is delivering a couple hundred deep tears, well. As if to answer the thought, a slice of flesh fell from Gut-Wrench's elbow, dangling by what seemed like threads. Purple blood splattered against the ground. The announcer yelled, "First blood goes to Skarzar!" Amicus looked appalled. But the crowd was loving it, people up in their seats and yelling, adding to the rush in my ears. The strategy was also made to be dramatic. I allowed myself a small smile. The two circled each other around the central ring, blood dripping from Scar's teeth and Gut-Wrench's arm. They both still looked confident. Scar tensed as if ready to leap. Gut-Wrench did the same. Scar leapt to one side, and Gut-Wrench started heaving a punch, but it was a fake-out, a short hop, and as soon as Scar's feet were planted, he coiled, whole body, and sprung. The resulting leap was much higher than Gut-Wrench expected, and Scar sailed over. He landed on its shoulders, twisting, teeth planting onto neck, front claws digging into shoulders, and then those back legs, tipped with razors, began eviscerating Gut-Wrench's back with a sound of tearing paper. Long stripes of purple whipped out into the sand behind them. Gut-Wrench roared and began wrestling with Skarzar to get him off its back. They fell to the ground together, sand spraying. For multiple seconds, Scar was able to dance out of the way of those arms, each hop scoring chunks of flesh out with his teeth, before Gut-Wrench was able to get a handle on Scar's forehead. It tried to squeeze, but Scar planted his feet again. There was a tearing sound, and Scar was able to hop away. A small puff of red blood hung in the air. When Gut-Wrench opened its hand, a patch of skin and fur, as big as my face, fell. I could feel the audience turn their attention to Skarzar, the missing flesh revealing a smooth white skull underneath. No bleeding. I smiled fully at that. It had taken months to figure out a healthy way for essentially a bone exoskeleton. The scan would have shown an actual exoskeleton, but there was no way to tell the properties of skin without testing it. And who would test the skin of runt fur? The two leapt into battle again. I could see Amicus stand and tense, clearly worried about what was going on. Scar had the upper hand, though those long arms got a solid hit in the fighting. But Gut-Wrench was bleeding now. "Now!" Amicus yelled, interrupting my thoughts. Now what? Gut-Wrench smashed its shoulder into Skarzar, getting a second of space, and Scar readied for another leap. But then, Gut-Wrench did something strange. Instead of pressing the attack, it brought one hand to the other and tore. There was a sickening wet crack and gore flew, and then Skarzar leaped and I knew it was the wrong move. Gut-Wrench met Skarzar's chest with its now injured hand, and there was a yelp. Scar was caught. It scrabbled at its chest, and I could see red blood plummet off and down Gut-Wrench's arm, mixing with wet, purple sand. I held the bars of the viewing area as Gut-Wrench raised its other hand to grab Skarzar's throat and squeeze. More blood. More choking noises. Skarzar slowed its movements. The crowd was wild, screaming, whooping. Amicus stood up to laugh, full belly. I couldn't hear it. I only watched as Gut-Wrench flexed and tore Skarzar apart, head and shoulders from chest. I looked away. It was over. The announcer blared the announcement. My fists were tight. I only saw the bloody sand. How much money, how much time was lost here, now. My face was wet, and I half expected it to be the blood that was sprayed messily across all the walls. Blood I had grown myself. Gut-wrench released my pet, leaving it in pieces on the floor. It shook its hand loose, the one that had been deep in Skarzar, and I could see now. Its hand was snapped back, flat against the arm. At where the wrist should have been, it was a sharpened spike of bone, drenched red. It must have been hidden in the forearm bones, blending in with the surroundings in the scan. I looked up and saw Amicus smiling at me, and it was a smile that was mean and knowing. She'd gotten me with a dirty trick, and she knew I hadn't made this easy for her. I'd lost before. I'd lost plenty of times before, but never when I had really been trying. This was supposed to be my big entrance, and I'd botched it. I'd given enough of a performance that I was on the radar now, but I had no rep to show for it, no success for funding, and now I had an enemy. Damn it, I thought. Damn it. I told the attendant to send my pay to the usual place, and left.
Wow, that was a really great story. I absolutely loved just kind of not only this world that you're building, but your attention to the action definitely made us feel like we were there. So what kind of inspired you to even write this?
I real quick just want to put a lampshade on the Love, Death, and Robots episode, that this is not a ripoff of... I mean, it's definitely inspired by that, but I did have this idea originally before I watched that episode, I promise. So
yeah. What about a Real Steel?
Or Real Steel I did watch before I got the idea, so maybe I did steal this from Real Steel. This is a biological Real Steel.
I mean, honestly, I feel that more people should borrow stuff from Real Steel. It's a forgotten movie from 2013?
I'm gonna be honest. I went in not wanting to like the movie, and then I liked the movie. So, yeah. So just I really like biopunk stuff. I love Twig. This is just another little avenue of that, right? I mean, watching animals fight is extremely unethical, but it is pretty damn cool. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah.
Don't do it because that's cruel and they're alive, but this is fiction, so I can do that. And what's even cooler than animals? Putting animals together and making them weird. So
I mean, hey, that is why Pokemon has been as popular as it has been for so many years.
Yeah, so think of this as like a really weird Pokemon. A really bloody
awesome.
Yeah.
A metal Pokemon.
Metal Pokemon with like some messed up people doing stuff. All right, so there's a lot of elements in this, a lot of stuff I can talk about. Of course, we want to focus on the action probably. So how did it work for you? Was it clear what was going on? Was there parts that like just were confusing?
Yeah, I mean, throughout it was really clear. I think something that I really liked is the time that we're spending in this main character's head, and also how cocky they are going into this match. And as the events of the story unfolds, you kind of see that his confidence was probably misplaced, and how much he really believed in this creature that inevitably got strangled and ripped in half.
Yeah.
So that was a aspect that I really, really liked. How in the beginning you spent a lot of time talking about these two opponents before we even see what kind of creatures they've came up with.
Yeah, so regarding setting up the character a lot, I actually didn't realize that this guy's hybrid was going to die until I was like basically done with the story.
Okay.
Yeah, I basically was like, well, okay, what's the twist here? What's like the surprising thing? And it's like, oh, plot twist, he actually loses. And I think that actually like really made this story a lot more interesting than what I was originally planning, because with all of like the cockiness and the sureness that he's gonna win and all of that, it's really setting up kind of the stakes here and like making the fall even greater. And so it like if he'd gone in and was like, okay, I'm gonna lose, or if he went in knowing that he's gonna win and he does win, right, and there's no like he almost loses kind of thing, no yeah, there would be a lot of loss of tension.
Yeah, and then also I think a really cool thing that you did by having him lose at the very end is that it provided the story with a different trajectory than I at first thought it would be. Because if he had won, well, that would have been awesome, and it would have been a really great scene that you painted. But there isn't any sense afterwards. Like, all right, cool.
Right.
This cocky main character won, so I guess his cockiness was well placed. Instead of now, you're like, oh wow, he spent so much money into creating this monster, and now he's out of money, he's out of rep, and now he just has to go back home.
It makes the story a lot more interesting if he just got what he wanted and that's it. Yeah. So I think that that ended up turning out pretty well.
Focusing more so on the action, right? Because I know one big issue that I found when it comes to writing action is deciding what to focus on, what to keep in, and how much description you really have to set up so that when you do get to the action, the picture you were trying to paint isn't really lost. And in this one, you did really well. Like I was through it to the very end, and I could see these crazy monsters battling it out. So I guess my question is, what was that process of trying to decide what to focus on, what to keep in?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it was looking at how other people do it and talk about it. I think it probably was a Sanderson lecture or Writing Excuses. That's another great writing podcast.
It's a fantastic one.
Yeah, that talks about... I don't really remember where I got this phrase, but with action, it really helps to have you have an eye and it's looking one particular place and it's moving as stuff is going on, and what is the eye tracking kind of thing.
Okay.
And so to look at this first paragraph, right? So the horn blared, the sound kept going as the two launched at each other. Fur collided with leather, right? So we're looking at just skin. Yeah. And then we zoom out. Gut wrench swung those long arms into the side of Skarzar. So now we have that impact, and then now we're looking at Skarzar. He was ready, shifting to slide along the ground with the blow, twisting out of reach with the clumsy hands. When Gut Wrench had reached the edge of its momentum, Scar planted his feet and with those powerful legs rocketed forward. So it's this is a singular motion, and I'm trying to just describe things that are related, right? So I'm not I'm trying specifically not to move my narration eye and look at faces or teeth at this moment, because that's not what's relevant.
Okay, so you stay very focused to the action at hand.
That is the most important, yeah. And another thing that I remember reading or hearing from some other people is to with action not have short sentences, even though short sentences, and there's some parts in here where I had some short ones and I didn't really mean to, but short sentences, having a lot of them, when you're writing it sometimes feels like it's going to be really fast, because he ran, she threw a punch, he dodged, right? And it feels like those are quick because you're writing them quick. But when you're reading them, each period adds this pause that really slows down the feel of the fight, or whatever is going on. And so what I was trying to do here is to have these kind of longer sentences that go on for multiple lines, using a lot of commas and stuff like that. And I think another effect of having these long sentences and using commas a lot is that it also does force you to have these things always be related to each other, because you can't, if it's in the same sentence, it doesn't feel right for you to jump to an entirely different angle or topic. So that's just some of the thoughts that I was trying to keep in mind as I was writing it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's very apparent, throughout, especially the fight scene. I did notice that there were longer sentences, but at the same time, the length of them kind of allowed us as the reader to get multiple bits of this action as it's going through, so we can totally paint it within our mind. I think another thing that you used really well to kind of build up this action was a lot of your terminology. From the main character having a runt creature versus the big boys I liked where you used the wrestling terminology of the opponent going heel. That was really nice.
Yeah. I think you taught me that word, or like taught me that you could use it in this kind of context.
Yeah, which too much wrestling.
But yeah, I'm glad that the setup worked to like carry through the scene. As I've mentioned on previous episodes, I've really one like big flaw I had when I was going into writing anything was that I really wasn't sure how much and how often the audience needs to be reminded of something. Mm-hmm. And in this, I kind of let go a bit. I described the arena like once, and then I might remind you just when like the sand is relevant again, but like that's it. I'm not reminding you of like the fur and stuff like that unless like it really is relevant to a certain moment. Another thing I was paying attention to was using a lot of like really physical language, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't dig out of the thesaurus, but I had to think for some moments. I was trying to like, yeah, like there's only so many times you can use rip and tear before it's like the same thing over and over. So I was having to, I pulled out eviscerate, which is, I love that word. It feels so good.
It's such a strong word too. Jeez.
Mm-hmm. And actually, it's having to use a different word sometimes like made me do something more interesting. There's some stuff like that.
So going back through, I'm pretty sure there was a lot from this that you probably had to cut, or I guess just certain changes that you made. So like, if you did have a second chance to like go back through it, what exactly would you do to kind of, I don't know, make it a little bit more tasty?
Sure. So basically, I wrote this in two settings. I wrote the first half one night, and then I wrote the actual fight scene and the meat of the story the next day. So basically, like I had set up in my mind what this world was and stuff, and then the next day I was like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be doing action. Let's actually get to the action. And it forced me to put some stuff around. So originally it was like, main character walking into the arena and like seeing everyone, and then eventually like we cut to getting the fight started, and I was like, okay, let's just start the fight, and then I had to adapt stuff around that. So if I was going to make this like longer, I think I would show a little bit more. I might have like the main character going against some other runts perhaps, or just doing some more setup, not slowing it down. I wouldn't like describe another fight with a runt like in this much detail because it's not really worth spending that much time on it. Mm-hmm. But creating more of a run up so that like this is like the ending of the first chapter, right? And this is like an actual like big fall and a big loss, and probably set up some more stakes for like why this is really bad.
Okay, I see. So basically do more work, not necessarily on the action bit, but all that setup, kind of making that a little bit more palpable.
I think this is like a pretty okay length for an action thing like this, because I think if it goes much further, it really is only like 3 paragraphs of action, more or less, maybe a little bit further, but in between some of the action is just like descriptions of what the main character is thinking and setting up some more of those stakes, so it ends up feeling a little bit longer. It ends up being like more like a 1 or 2 pages. But when you really get into like the blow by blow and just like continue going on and on about stuff, it gets, when I do that in my own writing, it gets pretty boring. So I was trying to do other stuff with that.
I mean, that's another thing of like determining how much of this action you really need to add, because if it's not that much, then it's not really action, or could pass by too quick to where the reader isn't really allowed to see it. But as you said, if it is too long, then the reader bows out. I know, like halfway through reading The Road by Cormac McCarthy, I just totally checked out. Because he just kept talking about this black deserted wasteland, which, yes, it was cool the first time in like the first chapter, but I'm on chapter 8. So
yeah, when it's stuff that really doesn't like matter so much, what I was trying to do here is that like every blow that I talked about was like important for, I mean, I was trying to anyway. Like the first one is like the first blood, we're establishing how this is not going to go the way that Amicus thinks. The second one is, really like we're really starting to win until with the skin ripping off thing. So we're like, oh, there's more tricks. Thank you. That was something I discovered as I went. I didn't have that in mind before
Okay, so
started doing it.
like as you were writing, you said, "Oh, maybe Scar." His name isn't Skarsgård. It's
Skarzar.
Skarzar.
You can just call him Scar if you want. It's fine.
Yeah, maybe Scar has this bone exoskeleton, and I do like how that also linked into the kind of checking process.
Yeah.
That a lot of these creatures have. So yeah, that was just really great. I really dug it.
I'm glad you liked it. Just to finish off the topic. Oh, and then of course the last bit of action is the twist, right? And that's the dramatic thing. If this fight was like on screen, there might be like more. If it was a real fight, there definitely would be more. More of this like taking little bites out, stuff like that. And one thing, as I went, I didn't describe stuff that kind of already happened as much. So like I wasn't describing specifically, what's getting cut, or there's the part right before that skin ripping off thing. I have a gut wrench roared and began wrestling with Skarzar to get it off its back, right? And they fell to the ground, sand spraying. For multiple seconds, Scar was able to dance out of the way of those arms. They each hopped, scoring chunks of flesh out with its teeth before Gut Wrench was able to get a handle on Scar's forehead. So if you saw that visually, that actually would be like a lot of different actions, right? The wrestling is actually a lot of movements, but it does not matter what specifically is happening. It does not matter at all if his hand like grabs at his leg and then he gets free and then he like smacks his chest, or it doesn't. None of that is interesting.
Yeah.
So you just sum it up. So this is probably all pretty obvious to some people, but for me, when I was first for a long time when I was describing action, that is the kind of stuff I would describe. You have to learn that it's like the audience can be trusted to imagine some stuff.
Yeah, and that's like a huge thing, is just determining how much you can trust your audience to realize what you are doing. And through writing this and like other things, I've kind of come to find out that a audience is a lot smarter and a lot more perceptive on certain things than you might think. So you should treat them as such and not as children.
Yeah. The last thing I want to mention is with the twist with the hidden spike thing. I'm happy with that turned out, because was something that I had set up already. I didn't even have to go back and add it with the scanning thing. Just that it was kind of ironic, right? Because the main character really prides themselves on not having any like little dirty tricks, right?
Yeah.
They have like advantages. They did it the skin thing is like a little bit of a trick, but it's not really a trick. It's just like an advantage.
Yeah.
And then this like hidden spike thing, which is also in that episode of Love, Death, and Robots.
Yes, it is.
That's exactly in there. Whatever. It's exactly what like the main characters pride themselves on not doing. So it like hurts a little bit more that's what gets them.
Yeah. Nice. So after writing this fantastic story, what is the takeaway for you?
I think I just have like a better handle on action. I think I also have a better handle on a little bit of voice and this irony and letting characters suffer, because I'm not someone that's actually really good at making my characters lose.
Yeah.
It just doesn't come naturally to me. I have to think, oh yeah, that would make sense and make the story more interesting. So yeah, I think this is another step in the right direction of trusting myself and getting a little bit more uncomfortable with stuff. So okay, so that's all that I have about my story. Let's get into the listener story section.
Nice. Our listener stories are great every week, and we're so thankful for the people that do write in. It makes this entire thing all worth it. But as a disclaimer for those listening right now, we are going to spoil these stories immensely, talk about them in depth and in detail. So if you haven't read them, please stop right now, go and listen to them so you can get the full experience of it without being spoiled.
That's right. This week we're talking about stories by Ace of Sword, Vivachuk, a new writer, Jarby Joss, another new writer, Kausublu V2, and then Fat Baby Owlbear, another new writer.
Nice.
All wonderful usernames all around. I love
know.
these.
And
These are great.
It's crazy. We got 3 new writers this week. That's really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's just get on into it, right?
All right. So first up will be Ace of Sword with
oh my god, how did this happen? How Ace, for those who haven't kept up, Ace of Sword has been writing basically a serial along with us. So basically, almost every single week, they've written an entry in this particular setting, advancing the story, and almost every single time they write in this setting, we've selected their story. We talked in one of the discussion threads, but basically we've only missed like 2 of their entries ever, and there's like what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and now 9 entries. So I don't.
Well, you know what? I mean, they are throwing their like story out there every week, and they are leaving comments. So
exactly. So that just goes to show if you do this every week, you do get selected a lot. So
also,
that's just how it goes.
It could be that they are a Doof Patreon member. Which also gives them another leg up in the drawing process. So
I think that is also the case. But yeah, so Ace of Sword has another story. This one is called Firebrand, and this is the last chapter in this series, I believe. And it is a fitting end. So this guardswoman that we've been following, the story is a little bit hard to summarize because there's just so much that has happened. There's been 10,000 words of progress before this, or however much. So, but basically, this guardswoman is confronting the lord of the city over a conspiracy that has been brewing to basically like kill the poor, right? And there's been a cover up, right? So she's addressing the lord, and she makes an accusation that there was another magic user there that attacked her. And magic users are pretty rare, right? So the lord says to put the court mage, an old man, and probably not the culprit, and the guardswoman in jail until this can be sorted out. But over the course of this conversation, and just by looking at different people, the guardswoman kind of realizes that it was not someone outside the city. It was not some criminal that set fire to the slums and killed a bunch of people and there's no criminal organization doing a cover-up. It's actually the lord of the city, who really, I mean, this whole story has really seemed like a kind and like good person, but we get revealed that he's actually been the villain all along. He started this fire that destroyed the homes of all the poor so that he could basically force them to like work for like housing and for like a public works project.
So he's creating slaves.
Basically. And so the guardswoman, the Lord, kind of drops his guise. He becomes kind of evil. He starts using magic, which he has had secretly. Or actually, no, I don't think it's been that secret, but we didn't know that it was like an evil kind of magic. And so the tensions rise, escalate, and the guardswoman brings out the fire magic that she has had, a new kind of magic. And a fight ensues. There's some great descriptions of how this fire is working. There's a particular fantastic line here I want to pull out. Men screamed as armor and jewelry were reminded of their fiery birth. Ooh, oof. That's great. It's a great way to just say that the metal got hot. That's awesome. But it ends with a callback to basically the very beginning. She learns that last spell that this old man that created the magic book that she got that gave her magic conflagration, and we get the implication that she's kind of gone a little bit mad with magical power and is like gonna burn down this entire place.
I mean, what a fitting end to this saga that we've been talking about on this podcast. And I mean, talking about the action, that entire section of this actual battle was handled really well, especially when dealing with magic. I know it can become very difficult to try and balance those two things, but it turned out really great. At the end, I'm almost saddened that we won't have this story to kind of depend on each week
and to every single week. Ace of Sword in a comment talks about they might be doing a like epilogue sequel setup kind of thing. But that this is the end of the guardswoman's like story in this anyway. Ace of Sword was asking about how we picture the guardswoman. I mean, I picture her as a powerhouse. So like I think Ace of Sword did a great job with that. I think that's more like implied than like full on described, but I think that works out fine.
Tall with rippling muscles.
Yeah, I mean, if she can like punch people's heads in and like barrel through guards like she does in the stories, like that you kind of imply a physique that way. So yeah, so I think the main critiques is more just like on particular. I think the main critique of this particular chapter is some of the dialogue felt a little. I don't know what the word is, like not spacey, but like maybe disjointed, unfocused, maybe. I don't know. Not all of those words apply. One specific word between all of those applies, where it just felt a little off. But the action in this is really, really well done, and I really liked it. And of course, this twist is really interesting as well. So
yeah. So I mean, I think the only shout out that I can really think of is that now that this series is finished, it's the perfect time to go back and do the edit thing.
For the next do the edit thing, Ace of Sword, please collate all of your stories and then edit them into one 2,000 word story, because we only have so much time to read.
Yeah.
So
cut it all down.
No. But thanks so much for submitting that, Ace of Sword. This is really cool. Yeah. And I'm glad that someone is doing a serial like this and was able to complete it even when it got so long.
I know, it's so
got
awesome.
so long.
All right, so next up is Vivichuk with Hard Truth to Swallow.
So we have Cass. She is from the very first line. We see how stressed out she is. She is frightened of something that is about to happen, and we don't fully understand what that means. My first thought was that this is like a Groundhog Day kind of thing, just that I was like left wondering, but in a way that wasn't confusing. So she's actually like on a camping trip, but she knows that something bad is about to happen because in her dreams she actually sees a little bit of the future. It seems almost always bad things, and she's kind of riddled with anxiety because of it. It's not an anxiety of like things that she's afraid might happen, but things that she knows is going to happen. We get a lot of description. She's had some conflicts with her parents who like don't believe her and think that she's just stressed out and dealing with a lot of stuff as a teenager. And while that sympathy is probably good for someone that is dealing with those things, she's not dealing with them in that way, so it's not actually helpful. The anxiety increases. What's going to happen is that this slumber party kind of, or camping trip, I think, like a field trip, I believe. One girl is going to find out that another girl is cheating with her boyfriend, and they're gonna have they're gonna start fighting. One of them's gonna hit their head and bleed, and I almost thought that she might be dying, but I don't think that's the case. But clearly very injured in a bad way, and things are gonna escalate and be really bad. And in conjunction with that, it's unclear if this is just because of the anxiety or if it's a direct side effect of these visions coming to fruition. But Cass is also getting like more nauseous and knows she's about to throw up. So there's just a lot of horrible tension in this, and it ends exactly as the story says it does. The fight is about the start to kick off the argument, and she feels the vomit push its way through her throat. And over her retching, she hears the start. So, yeah, super tense.
I know as you said, it's a fantastic story that's just tense throughout, and I love like how much this is affecting Cass physically, right? And like how it perfectly measures up to this event that she knows with beyond a shadow of a doubt is going to happen, and it does happen. And it's that ending that really drives it home. Yeah,
I think having such a physical description of what this anxiety is, of just vomit, right, among everything else, anchors all of these feelings into this physical feeling, and really, I mean, we know what vomiting feels like. It's horrible.
Yeah. It's never good.
And yeah, the story just really goes to length to show how I keep using the same words, but that's because of how focused the story is. Anxious and tense and just feels bad, man. And that's really well done. Next story is by Jarby Joss, a new writer as well, with Tales of Port Saline 01. So we open up on these docks with this warehouse in this particular narration that is pretty direct in its voice. It's first person, but it seems like it's almost like talking to us. It's very train of thought. We're in this old detective's head who has been paired up with this younger detective, and we get some classic
the
old detective doesn't want to be dealing with the younger detective, but like they have to, and so there's like a little bit of tension and arguments there, but for the most part, it's pretty respectful. They go in to investigate the crime scene, and we see some more of their dynamic, the old one kind of testing the younger one. And over the course of this, we kind of get that there's powers in this world, and it's very like subtly, implied. Just like first in dialogue, just what do you think? Could it be powers? And so we get the implication that that's a normal thing you got to investigate. And then we slowly find out that the characters have powers themselves, and it's done in a very nice, slow reveal kind of way.
Yeah.
And basically, we just get some more description of what's going on here. We end with a clear lead on where this might be going and how they might have to go about it. So I thought this was really interesting, and I really do love that like slow reveal and how we get the dynamic between these two characters and how it's both like positive and negative in different ways.
Definitely. I think it's a really great first section in this story. And I like how the addition of these powers is, as you said, very subtle. And it doesn't really it doesn't take the forefront. Is well integrated into this society and especially in the way that the characters talk. I also do enjoy the trope of the younger detective being paired up with the older one, because that always like breeds a certain sense of levity and comedy, while also setting up both of the characters by them being paired with something that they're not. So I
Right.
really dug it.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it, and I'd love to see more of these characters.
Yeah.
The next story is by Kaosublu V2 with Night Shift from the Magic Rings series. So I think this is the third entry.
And
so
correct me if I'm wrong. We've talked about most of them.
Yes, we talked about all three, I believe.
Three,
yes.
yeah.
In the first one, a hedge mage created a magic tome before being hunted down, and threw this magic tome into a basket. And then in the last chapter, our main character, Kara, bought the basket and therefore the tome as well. So we open with her. Basically, immediately we could tell that this book is not normal. There's a rush of information literally at her fingertips, an unending deluge for an insatiable mind. If only she turned the page, nothing else mattered. Only the book, the pages, the words, the very those letters themselves. No piece too small to disclose some small sec. And then she gets interrupted. So that's a really great way to set up what this book is. It's really interesting. Just it's really fun to read.
Yeah.
It's sort of like maddening, Lovecraftian kind of thing, but not in a obnoxious way, like how Lovecraft sometimes is.
How he always is. And so we follow Kara closes the book. She goes back to the inn. We kind of just get some more slice of life sort of stuff and like what's going on in her life. She's just the barmaid at an inn, making some tips and stuff like that. And we just get some more setting stuff until at the end of the day, she then looks at the book again and she opens it and the knowledge washes over her again. And again, we get another flooding of knowledge, and there's some great description stuff here of how every single detail in this book matters. And as we go through this description, we start hearing the actual writing of it, the sound of the ink as it was scrawled in a frenzy, delicate and exact and desperate to be recorded. And so I really like how the description really feels like we are diving deeper and deeper into it. And in the morning she has a bunch of new terrible knowledge. Yeah, and I mean, as you said, the description in this definitely takes the cake. Like, it has this slight Lovecraftian feel, but it's still very grounded. And I do love how after the beginning we get more about this character and kind of setting her up and her kind of inner mundane living, and then we go back to this book and mysticism around this book is being built up very well through the description, and it just entices me to want to read more of it.
Yeah. If I'm going to do any critique, I think that the line before that last description, it has then she slowly reached for the book and opened it, and the knowledge washed over her again. That feels like a great last line. So I almost wanted it to just end there, and then like in another section, another chapter, we kind of flash back and get that kind of description
Yeah.
because it just like it feels so like something is going to happen, not like a full-on cliffhanger because we know what's happening, we know that it's the knowledge washing over her, but in just in a very enticing way. And I think when we get told what the magic is, what it does before it ends, it's like we feel, I mean, this isn't necessarily a clear bad thing, but we feel like very satisfied, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, if this was a book or something like that, I think you'd probably want to end on the like fade to black, something, you know, find out next week what going in this book is like. Okay. Yeah, that was a fantastic story. Then I'm really interested in seeing some more horrible tome reading and madness and all sorts of stuff.
All right, so our last story for this week is by Fat Baby Owl Bear with Bearing Gifts.
This is a really fascinating story. This was actually, I remember Fat Baby Owlbear and the next person, Sir Raven, both posted like within like just a couple hours of me posting the link, I believe, which was like, I was like, God damn, I guess I need to start posting it earlier. And then this week I posted it on Sunday because I forgot. So, whoops. Yeah, I keep meaning to do the scheduling thing. Anyway, let's get into the story. So we open with this description of this cyberpunk city, and it's awesome. I love this opening. Central San Alejo was an oil slick of neon signs, a riot of flashing colors that burned themselves onto the retinas of anyone who looked too long. I love that particular description, oil slick of neon signs, because it's just so... It's evocative in this really, really effective and efficient way, and poetic as well, because it's like, I talked about this in the comments, so Fat Baby Owlbear has already heard this, but an oil slick, right, is, when you see it, it's like iridescent, right? It's got all those different colors in it. Mm-hmm. It's, but has all these other connotations of it being man-made, it being polluted, it being like sticky and bad and not
corrosive,
normal, right? And then you have neon signs, which are these also like colorful, but also like very garish and kind of like cheap in connotation sort of things. Mm-hmm. And so the city, Central San Alejo, being this polluted, full of color, but in a cheap way sort of place, just set off the bat, just really gives us an entire idea of what this place is.
And I think it's great how, like, in other works that I've seen, just to describe that, it would be 3 whole paragraphs, and it's summed up in this one, like, really well-written sentence.
Not even the whole... I'm not even talking about the whole first sentence. I'm talking about the first clause in a compound sentence. Yeah, so okay, so that's the first sentence I'm talking about. Now to summarize the actual story. So we follow Dana, who has these augmented eyes, but they're kind of augmented in a cheap way, so clearly, you know, something's happened. They glow green, and poison. You know, they're not as good as they're better than real eyes, maybe, but not better than like legally purchased augmented eyes. So she's going along the city. We get some more, you know, great description of what this place feels like. It's cyberpunk. It's dirty. You know, it's a little bit authoritarian. She goes into a Gimbal's shop, biomechanic, you know, cyberpunk mechanic kind of place, bringing Chinese food as a sort of like extra payment, right? Almost the entry fee, and then lies down on the surgical table. And then when she lies down, the sound of heavy government-scheduled rain starts beating on the roof, and Gimbal puts her under anesthesia to do some more augmentation. So super evocative, wonderful, you know, scene of cyberpunk stuff. I loved, you know, so the light little twists that were in there that are just like a little bit different from your average cyberpunk thing. Yeah, I love this.
Yeah, and as we've talked about so much, the setting is so great. It's really tangible. And the description and the detail taken into these augmentations is very cyberpunk. And I absolutely love anything cyberpunk, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I think this story does do a really great job of taking that and trying to make it its own. And I really appreciate that.
My mistake. I just realized that Dana's non-binary, and I've been using female pronouns this whole time. I don't know how I forgot that. I remember like noting that and thinking it's really cool, just to have more non-binary representation, and then I forgot. It's been a week since I read this story. Okay, that's my excuse. Dana, cyberpunk has always been tied up with the queer movements and stuff like that. So this is another cool entry in that. Anyway, so at the end here, this hiss of anesthesia and Dana slides down into unconsciousness to the drum of the rain is such a really good, a wonderful like image and feeling, and like it's got all these sounds and stuff like that too. And as I mentioned in a comment, I think prolonging this a little bit more and adding some more meaning into this government scheduled rain and the anesthesia and like what we, the audience, if not Dana themselves, should be feeling reading that, I think would have made this ending like really, really good. I know Fat Baby Owlbear talks about how it ran out of time. And again, I just want to remind you guys that it's totally okay to take a little bit extra time to finish stuff off. The main purpose with the timer is really just to get yourself going, right?
It's that pressure.
Yeah, to not put off writing stuff. If you know that you're going to be able to write, even if you're going to have a little extra time at the end, go ahead and finish off that ending, especially if like you've already reached it, right? If you're rushing to reach the ending and then you reach it, it's okay if you take a little bit of extra time to polish it up and get it to where you want it to be, because that's really the most important part, is to be happy about what you're doing here. So
exactly.
But really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a fantastic story. Well, all right, those are all of our stories for this week. We are super sad that we can't get to every single last one that was submitted this week, but we ain't got that kind of time, sadly. But we do want to say a big ol' do the right thing thank you to everyone who did submit a story this week and the people that did comment. All right, so thank you, Sarah Penguin.
Thank you, Zakatiggy.
Thank you, Ace of Sword.
Thank you, Vivichuk.
Thank you, Ghost Pac-Man 4.
Thank you to Kamikaze Tomato.
Thank you, Jarby Jab.
Thank you, Kausubalu V2.
Thank you, One Mary Lilac.
Thank you, Paradox.
Thank you, Sir Raven.
And thank you, Fat Baby Owlbear.
And thank you so much to all the people that did leave comments. Leaving comments not only helps you in your ability to analyze someone else's work, but getting feedback for something that you put time into just feels so great. And it can definitely help you kind of hone your pen when it comes to writing. So thank you very much, Ghost Pac-Man 4.
Kamikaze Tomato.
Thank you, Castle V2.
Jarby Jaws.
Paradox.
Fat Baby Owlbear.
Ace of Sword.
And Vivichuk. You guys did a great job. Thanks so much.
Fantastic job. If you want to be like all of these wonderful writers for this week, then you can go to our subreddit, which is /r/do the right thing. All you have to do is go to the most recent week or any week that you really want to write on. Set a timer for 30 minutes and use 3 of 4 words for that week.
That's right, which we'll announce at the end here. If you don't have a Reddit account or just want to send us feedback, you can send us an email at rightthingcast@gmail.com. I promise that we are getting better at checking it and actually responding. Apologize for people in the past that didn't get the proper feedback. You guys are awesome. We also have now discussion threads on the subreddit, so if you want to talk about the actual episode itself without leaving a story, that's the place to do it.
And if you want to have as much time as possible to see next week's words, well, you could just listen to the end of this podcast. And or you can also go to our Twitter, which is @RightThingCast, where we will try our best to post the words for next week on the weekend.
Yeah, it's supposed to be on Saturdays. I found a post schedule thing for Reddit, and I just haven't figured out how it works. And I'm so annoyed because I finally got the motivation to use it when I was doing Decomposing Worm, but then I actually can't do it with Decomposing Worm because I need to have the episode finished beforehand, some other stuff, and I was like, this is very annoying. But yeah, so Do the Right Thing post should be really easy to schedule, and I just have put it off for way too long. But anyway.
So, Matias, tell me, what is happening in our network?
A lot of things are happening in our network. The one that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to be selfish here, is of course what I just mentioned, Decomposing Worm, a new podcast to the network where Clarence and I, frequent. I shouldn't say frequent, but a guest of Do the Right Thing. He's really, really cool. We're doing a podcast analyzing Worm book by book. Basically, so Scott and Matt, We've Got Worm, when basically they had some other podcasts before then, but that's the big thing, for our network, of course. And they analyzed arc by arc, right? So each episode was covering one arc, and they went chapter by chapter over it. And so Clarence and I, just to switch it up, we are doing it book by book, which we arbitrarily divided Worm into books. The first one is arcs 1 through 8. So if you've read arcs 1 through 8, you can go listen to that episode. The first episode is the overview episode, where we did more closer to the We've Got Worm thing, and you can hear Clarence's reactions and his wonderfully articulated themes and theories and all sorts of stuff. It's always delightful talking to Worm, talking about Worm to anyone. And then the next episode we're gonna do is we'll be writing some essays and stuff on Worm on these first 8 arcs.
Nice.
So I'm really excited to release that second episode that's coming out this Friday that this episode comes out. And yeah, it's gonna be super, super cool. And of course, there's so many other amazing things on the Doofcast, on the Doof Network. I know that the Elliot and Ruben just finished their pilot season. They did a bunch of one-off episodes with completely different themes. And after they finish Pale Reflections, whenever Pale is finished, they'll pick one of those to do a series on. There's some really, really great stuff in here. My votes are currently somewhere tied between, what was it called? The one that's on the Expanse series, which I don't remember the title of because it's in the Con Lang from that world, and it's great. They just are so happy when they're talking about it. And Stone Age Meeple, where Elliot and Ruben look at ancient board games and basically try them out and explain their history and stuff. That's like that.
So awesome.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. The first episode was on an Egyptian game called Senet, in which there's 3 theories on what the rules are, and they explain what those are. It's a really, really great discussion. I loved it. So yeah. So of course, there's so many other things. We've got 9 podcasts now or something like that.
We just keep growing.
I can't even remember.
You know what? Let's make it 10.
Let's make it 10. So if you like what we do here at Doof Media, all these crazy things, you can help us out by either leaving a rating and review, which is free, or donating $1 a month or whatever else you can afford at our Patreon.
By doing that, you would basically help us out, just with certain expenses, and also you will support the content that you do enjoy consuming. So if you have it and if you want to, go ahead and give it. It would benefit us all.
So next week, we're trying to theme these episodes. Again, let us know, what you guys think of this. We are going to be focusing on setting. So just different angles on that, description or world building, things like that. So Jarvis, you're excited for that?
Oh, I am quite excited. I'm going to pull out all of the stops and maybe come up with something that isn't boo-boo garbage.
Wow, that's all we can dream for. All right, is there anything else we need to cover before we outro here?
No, I don't think so. I think the only other thing that we need to really talk about is what next week's words are.
You know what? Go ahead and tell me. What are next week's words?
Well, next week's words are, and thank you so much for asking, they are rain, contain, corruption, and bubble.
All right, so we have rain as in the water that falls from the sky. I'm sure there's probably at least one other meaning of that word. Contain as in to either to keep something in something else, or a container. You could use it in that word, basically to hold something inside something. Corruption as in either the political way where government officials are paid off to not do their job, basically to let you break the law, or corruption in the more magical sense of disease but a disease that can be of anything. And bubble, so the little bubbles that float through the sky and bubble up through the water.
Is there any other
stuff like that?
Definition for bubble besides that?
Let's find out. I'm gonna Google it.
Alexa, define bubble.
I Googled, and so I have two interesting definitions. Of course, there is the verb, like bubbling emotions, things like that, right? And the other one, the fourth definition for a noun of bubble is a marine mollusk that typically has a thin scroll-like shell.
All right, so either we could talk about spherical gas things that come from liquid, or a skinny mollusk.
So what's your story going to be, Jarvis?
So my story for next week is going to be about a boy and his box of games. He has put every game that he has ever owned, from video games to board games, into this one strangely tiny box that somehow is able to hold all of it. It is able to contain everything that gives him joy in this small 4x4 box. Well, one day when he's moving out of his house, this thing that he cared about so much somehow slipped his mind. Now, he was hoping that he had just left it home, but in fact he didn't leave it home, and he left it right by where his car was parked, and it was raining that night. So in the heat of the moment, he sped up his car to a writhing 175 miles per hour, coming back home to get this box where all of his valuable things are in. And when he gets there, the box is worn, wet, and has been corrupted by the dingy acid rain that falls all over his small little town. He realized that maybe he shouldn't go in there, and maybe it was time for him to grow up and leave childish things behind. And after thinking that, he took the box and put it into his trunk, because he knew that he could not depart from it. And he drove back home. Bubble.
You had so much time. I thought you were like, this is all set up just for that final bubble, but no.
I just couldn't find any way on how to use the word bubble.
All right, so in my story, we are from the perspective of a squadron of plague doctor, kind of like it's like the fighting back the plague, because it's a sickness on the land. It's not a plague. It's actually the land is corrupted because this rain fell that corrupted the land. So this plague team is sent to contain it right inside the sphere, but it's steadily growing. And you know what this corruption is? It's actually a bunch of bubbles. So this rain falls, and then whenever the rain falls, like a bubble comes out, and like it explodes. And then when the bubble explodes, everywhere that the bubble explodes turns into more bubbles. And so it's just been spreading, and so like this team of doctors has to pop the bubbles from far away with really long needles. And that's my story.
Did you? Yeah, I guess you used all of the words.
I think my story. Let's switch off. I think my story actually is a much better example of setting. So let's do mine.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't want to write next week, so you can do my story.
All right, so I will write your story next week. Next week, by the way, we're going to be talking about setting. So, hopefully, both of our stories have a fantastic end, or at least a good beginning, or maybe an okay middle. You know,
an okay middle, which is all we can really hope for on this show, which is called
Doof Network.
Do the right thing.
Okay.
Bye.